Ava Hart had rehearsed this day 100 times in her head. She'd imagined walking into grad school with her chin high, her notebooks perfectly aligned, her life finally under control. No distractions. No heartbreak. Just focus. She wasn't the same girl who used to lose herself in someone else's eyes. At least, that's what she told herself when she caught her reflection in the glass door of the psychology building, shoulders back, hair neat, expression calm. Unshakable. The lecture hall was already half full when she entered. Students were chatting, laptops humming, pens clicking. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. She found a seat near the middle, close enough to hear, far enough to disappear. Advanced Psychology, Cognitive Behavior and Emotional Regulation, read the title on the whiteboard. Beneath it, someone had written, "Welcome to a new semester." Ava took a deep breath and tried to focus on the syllabus packet. New beginnings. New professors. Maybe, finally, a clean slate. Then the door at the front of the room opened. And her world tilted. He walked in with the same quiet confidence she remembered, the kind that filled a room without trying. His dark hair was a little shorter now, the sharpness of his jawline softened by time, but his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. "Good morning, everyone," he said, setting his bag on the desk. "I'm Dr. Ethan Carter. Welcome to Advanced Psychology." Her pen froze mid-note. Ethan. Her Ethan. No, not hers anymore. Not for a long time. The blood drained from her face, replaced by a slow, creeping disbelief. She blinked hard, once, twice, as if that might change what she was seeing. But he was real. Flesh and breath and memory, standing in front of 30 students who had no idea that he once knew how she looked when she cried, how she laughed when she was nervous, how she used to trace invisible circles on his wrist just to feel his pulse. Over the next semester, Ethan continued, we'll be exploring the psychology of attachment, emotional regulation, and human behavior under stress. Ava almost laughed. The irony was cruel. He glanced around the room as he spoke, scanning the students. His eyes brushed over her, too quickly, too deliberately. It wasn't the look of a man who didn't recognize her. It was the look of someone pretending not to. She dropped her gaze to her notebook, her heart hammering in her chest. Her fingers trembled. Stay calm, she told herself. You're not that girl anymore. But her body betrayed her. The warmth of old emotions surged through her veins, memories sparking behind her eyelids like flashbacks she hadn't consented to watch. He was talking about emotional conditioning now, using that same smooth, analytical tone he used when he tutored her as an undergrad. Understanding emotion means observing it, he said. Not reacting to it. Ava wanted to raise her hand and say, easy for you to say. Instead, she sat in silence, her throat tight. When the class ended, the students packed up quickly, chatting about assignments and group projects. Ava stayed seated, waiting for the room to clear. She needed a moment. Just one moment to breathe. She finally stood, sliding her notebook into her bag, and froze again when Ethan's voice came from behind her. Miss Hart. Her name sounded strange in his mouth, formal and distant. She turned. Dr. Carter. For a heartbeat, neither of them said anything. The air between them hummed, thick with everything unsaid. His expression was unreadable. I hope you're ready to be graded. Her lips parted in shock, but before she could reply, he turned back to his desk, already pulling up the next class's slides. Ava walked out of the lecture hall with her pulse racing and her heart somewhere between the past and the present. She had come here to study psychology. Instead, she'd just stepped into her own case study. Ava told herself she wouldn't look at him. She lasted all of 5 minutes. The next lecture was supposed to be straightforward introduction to course themes, expectations, a review of core theories. But nothing about sitting in Ethan Carter's classroom felt straightforward. He stood at the front of the room in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand as he wrote emotional detachment across the whiteboard. The bold letters seemed to mock her. Let's talk about control, he began, turning toward the class. In psychology, detachment doesn't mean indifference. It's about maintaining perspective when emotions run high. A healthy mind can feel deeply without losing itself. Ava felt his words land like pointed darts. Maybe she was imagining it, but his gaze lingered on her just long enough to sting. He continued, people often confuse detachment with apathy. But detachment, real detachment, is a form of strength. Her pulse quickened. She knew this tone, calm, clinical, detached. The same one he'd used when he broke up with her. Ava raised her hand before she could stop herself. So, she said, her voice steady but cool, you're saying that emotional distance can be healthy? He looked directly at her. In the right context, yes. And what about when it becomes avoidance? The room went still. A few students glanced between them, sensing something electric beneath the words. Ethan smiled faintly, that same almost smirk she used to hate and love in equal measure. That's a valid point, Miss Hart. Avoidance is different, it's fear disguised as control. So how do you tell the difference? She asked, matching his calm. Because from the outside, they look the same. His expression flickered barely, but she saw it. Intent, he said finally. Detachment is deliberate. Avoidance is reactionary. One is choice, the other is fear. Ava nodded, pen poised, as if she were taking notes. But inside, she wanted to say, then why did you choose to walk away from me and call it detachment? He moved on quickly, shifting the topic to emotional regulation. Yet Ava couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her head. It was a dance, one they'd done before, but now the rhythm had changed. When class ended, students lingered around him with questions. Ava packed slowly, her heart thudding. She could leave now, pretend none of this mattered. Or she could prove to herself that she wasn't afraid of him. She waited until the others cleared out before walking down the steps toward his desk. Good lecture, she said, keeping her tone professional. He looked up, eyes unreadable. Thank you. Her bag strap slipped off her shoulder, she adjusted it nervously. I hope you don't think I was being difficult earlier. He interrupted softly. You were challenging me. That's what grad students are supposed to do. She froze at his tone, neither cold nor warm, just measured. He capped his marker and placed it neatly beside the projector. You always did like pushing back. Ava hesitated. And you always liked having the last word. Their eyes met, and for a split second, time folded in on itself, their past selves echoing in the silence. He stepped closer, just enough for her to feel the familiar pull between them. Careful, Ava, he murmured. You might make people think we have history. She forced a small, sharp smile. Don't worry, Dr. Carter. History is the one subject I don't plan to revisit. Then she turned and walked out, every step echoing louder than the last. Outside the classroom, the cool hallway air hit her like a shock. Her hands were shaking, but her head was clear. If this was going to turn into a war of composure, she wasn't planning on losing. By the end of the week, Ava had convinced herself that she could handle this. That she could sit through his lectures, take her notes, and pretend her chest didn't tighten every time he said her name. But pretending was easier in a crowd. It wasn't so easy when her group project partner sent a text that morning. Hey, can you drop our outline at Dr. Carter's office? I'm sick. Sorry. Ava stared at the message for a long minute. Then she typed back, sure, even though every cell in her body screamed otherwise. His office was tucked into the far corner of the psychology building, a narrow space lined with shelves of journals and books. She knocked lightly, hoping, half praying, he wouldn't be there. Come in, came the low, familiar voice. Her pulse stumbled. She opened the door and stepped inside. He was at his desk, reading glasses low on his nose, surrounded by a fortress of papers. When he looked up, the years between them seemed to dissolve for one dizzying heartbeat. Ava. He said her name quietly this time, not Miss Hart, not student, just Ava. Dr. Carter, she replied, because formality was safer. He smiled faintly, that careful, unreadable expression. What can I do for you? She held up the folder. Project outline. My partner's out sick. He nodded and gestured to the desk. You can leave it there. She crossed the room, placed the folder down, and turned to go, except her bag caught on the corner of his chair. It tipped, scattering pens and papers across the floor. Sorry, she blurted, dropping to her knees to help gather them. He knelt too, their hands brushing over the same page. Electricity. The kind that shouldn't exist anymore. For a moment, neither moved. Then he said softly, "You always did rush when you were nervous." Ava froze. "I'm not nervous." He looked at her with that same patient curiosity he used to have when he was studying human behavior and her. "You're tapping your foot." She glanced down. Her heel was bouncing. She stopped it immediately. Force of habit. They stood, both pretending to straighten papers they didn't need to. He leaned back against his desk, arms folded. "How have you been?" "Fine." It was a lie, too quick and too practiced. His brow furrowed slightly. "Fine," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "You used to hate that answer." Ava met his gaze. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long," he said quietly. The air between them tightened again, tense, magnetic, dangerous. Ava shifted her weight, trying to breathe normally. "This isn't appropriate." "What isn't?" he asked, voice low but steady. "This." She gestured vaguely at the space between them, that invisible thread neither could cut. "You and me. Talking like this. Pretending this is just academic." He hesitated, then said, "Maybe it can be." "Can it?" she asked, her tone sharper now. "Because the last time we tried to stay professional, you left without a word." That hit him. She saw it in the way his shoulders stiffened, the flicker of regret in his eyes. "I didn't handle things well," he admitted after a long pause. "That's one way to put it," she said bitterly. A silence stretched, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Ethan sighed and looked away. "You should go. I don't want this to complicate your work." Ava grabbed her bag, her throat tight. Too late for that. She left before he could answer, the door clicking shut behind her. Out in the hallway, she leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her heart felt like it was caught between fury and nostalgia, between the urge to scream and the urge to remember. This was supposed to be just another semester. Instead, it was turning into the one experiment she swore she'd never repeat, testing how much a heart could take before it broke again. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Ava lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the city drifting through her window. She'd tried reading, tried meditating, even tried listening to an old lecture recording, but every time she closed her eyes, her mind went back to him. Back to them. It started like a movie she didn't mean to watch, unwanted but impossible to turn off. 3 years earlier. She'd been a junior then, running late to a study session in the university library. Ethan Carter was the graduate assistant assigned to help undergrads with research methods, a program she almost skipped that day. He was already there when she arrived, surrounded by open books and a half-empty coffee cup. "You're late," he said, glancing up from his notes. She flushed. "You said 5. It's 5:02. He smiled, that infuriatingly confident smile she would come to know far too well. In research, timing matters. It should have been annoying. It wasn't. He helped her with a paper on emotional cognition, but their conversation quickly drifted beyond textbooks. He challenged her ideas, teased her logic, pushed her to think deeper. And when she argued back, he didn't get defensive, he got interested. That was how it started. No grand confession, no spark at first sight, just two people talking until the library lights flickered, warning them it was closing. "Guess we lost track of time," he'd said, smiling. "Maybe that's a good sign," she'd replied. It was. And it wasn't. Over the next few months, they became inseparable. Coffee dates disguised as study sessions. Walks home that lasted an hour longer than necessary. The kind of late-night texts that blurred the line between academic curiosity and emotional intimacy. He was disciplined, ambitious, always striving for more. She admired that about him until she realized how little room his drive left for anything else. When he got accepted into the PhD program across the country, she was proud of him. But when she asked what that meant for them, he hesitated. "I don't know if I can balance both," he said one night, sitting on the edge of her bed, his voice heavy with guilt. "I barely have time to breathe, Ava." She tried to understand. "I'm not asking you to give up your dream. I'm asking you not to give us up." He'd looked at her with eyes full of conflict. You deserve someone who can be fully here. The words had felt clinical, detached, like a diagnosis. And when he left, he didn't even say goodbye in person. Just a voicemail she couldn't bring herself to delete for months. Now, years later, she still remembered how the library smelled that first day: paper, dust, and a hint of his cologne. And how the silence after his last message had felt like a weight pressing on her lungs. She rolled over, burying her face in the pillow. She hated that he still had the power to make her feel anything at all. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from her class group chat. Reminder, midterm paper topic proposal due next week. Carter said he wants original ideas. She groaned and opened her laptop, the glare too bright in the dark room. She typed without thinking, letting her frustration bleed into the keys. Emotional avoidance in high-functioning adults, the intersection of detachment and fear. She stared at the title, her chest tightening. It wasn't just research anymore. It was personal. She sat back, exhaling. Maybe it was time to stop running from the past and start dissecting it like a real psychologist would. If Ethan wanted to play the game of emotional composure, she'd play too. Only this time, she'd win. The next morning, when she submitted her topic proposal, she didn't expect to hear from him so soon. An email pinged in her inbox less than an hour later. From Dr. Ethan Carter. Subject: midterm proposal. Interesting choice of topic, Miss Hart. Let's discuss it further during office hours. EC. Ava stared at the screen. Her pulse quickened, but this time not from fear. If he wanted to talk about avoidance, she'd show him exactly what she'd learned about facing things head-on. Ava told herself that she was ready. She'd read every article she could find on emotional avoidance, re-watched his recorded lectures twice, and convinced herself that this next meeting would be purely academic. Nothing more. But the moment she stepped into his office again, the air felt heavier than before. Ethan was leaning against his desk, sleeves rolled up, the faintest trace of exhaustion in his eyes. He looked up as she entered and gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. His tone was calm, professional. Almost too professional. Ava sat down, clutching her notebook like a shield. You wanted to discuss my proposal? He nodded, glancing at the printed copy in his hand. Yes. Emotional avoidance in high-functioning adults. He looked up at her. Bold choice. Why? She asked. Because it's personal. Her lips twitched. Shouldn't good research be personal? Up to a point, he said, his voice dipping slightly. But objectivity matters. You don't want to get lost in it. She tilted her head, eyes steady on him. You mean like getting lost in your own emotions? He didn't flinch, but something in his jaw tightened. Ava. She leaned forward, pulse quickening. What? It's just a question, Dr. Carter. He sighed, setting the paper down. Don't do that. Do what? Use theory as a weapon. The words hit her harder than she expected. I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm studying it. He shook his head. You're still angry. That's not research, it's retaliation. Her throat went dry. So what if I am? Maybe anger is a valid form of motivation. He stepped closer to his desk, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders. You're one of the brightest students in this department, Ava. Don't waste that brilliance trying to prove something to me. That's not what this is about, she said, though even she didn't sound convinced. His gaze softened, the sharp edge in his tone fading. Then what is it about? She looked down at her notebook, her voice quieter now. You left. No explanation. No closure. And now you're standing here telling me not to make things personal when you're the reason I even understand what emotional avoidance is. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the low hum of his computer and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Ethan said, You're right. I left without giving you what you deserved. I thought I was protecting you, protecting both of us. But I was wrong. Ava's chest tightened. You think admitting that now changes anything? No, he said quietly. But maybe it means something. His sincerity threw her off balance. It wasn't the defensive, distant Ethan she'd known before. It was the one she'd fallen in love with, the one who used to listen, really listen. She forced herself to look away. We can't do this. I know. There are boundaries now, she said firmly. And we're going to respect them. Of course, he said, though his voice betrayed a hint of regret. Ava stood, smoothing her skirt, trying to gather the composure she'd lost somewhere between his words and her heartbeat. Then we understand each other. She turned toward the door. Ava, he said softly. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. For what it's worth, he added, you were never an experiment. Her breath caught. She didn't turn around. I know, she said finally. I just wish I could stop feeling like one. She left before he could answer, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. By the next morning, the department was buzzing. Someone had seen her leaving his office late. Someone else said they'd overheard her name mentioned in a faculty meeting. Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. When she walked into class that week, whispers trailed her like shadows. She ignored them, taking her usual seat, but when Ethan entered the room, their eyes met briefly, sharply, and in that one glance, she knew. Everything was about to get harder. Ava had always liked conferences. They meant anonymity, crowded hotels, coffee carts, name tags that made everyone equal. This time, though, anonymity was impossible. Ethan was the keynote speaker. She was presenting a student paper on emotional resilience. Same conference, same floor, same row of presentation rooms. Of course. She told herself she'd stay professional. She wore her sharpest blazer, practiced her talk until her throat went dry, and rehearsed polite smiles for the inevitable run-ins. But when she stepped into the hotel lobby and saw him at the registration desk, dark suit, sleeves rolled up, looking far too familiar, her composure fractured a little. He looked up, as if he'd felt her enter the room. His smile was brief, careful. Miss Hart. Dr. Carter, she replied, voice steady. Good luck on your presentation tomorrow. Thank you. You too. They could have been strangers. Perfectly civil, perfectly distant. And yet every word hummed with the tension of what they weren't saying. That evening, the conference dinner filled the ballroom with noise, silverware clinking, academics talking too loudly about grants. Ava found a seat at the far end of a long table, but fate or irony had other plans. Ethan arrived late, and the only open chair was beside hers. May I? He asked. She forced a smile. It's a free country. He sat, close enough that she could smell his cologne, clean, restrained, maddening. Halfway through dinner, a thunderstorm rolled in, shaking the windows. Lightning flashed behind the curtains, and the event coordinator announced, flights tomorrow morning may be delayed. Please check with your airlines. A murmur of complaints rippled through the crowd. Ava's stomach tightened. She had an early flight home. Now it might be cancelled. Later, after dinner, she checked the board in the lobby. All morning flights, cancelled. She sighed, dragging her suitcase toward the elevator. That's when she heard his voice behind her. Looks like we're both stuck here. She turned. Lucky us. His smile was faint. You can take that tone, but you know it's not my fault. Everything seems to be your fault lately, she muttered before she could stop herself. He chuckled softly. Still fiery. Still infuriating. They ended up in the same elevator, of course they did, and when the doors slid shut, the silence between them was louder than the thunder outside. Hours later, the power flickered. The hotel generators kicked in, leaving half the floor dim. Ava wandered to the vending area for a drink and nearly walked straight into him. He held a cup of coffee, hair slightly tousled, tie loosened. Couldn't sleep either? She sighed. Apparently not. Lightning keeping you up? Memories, she admitted before she could catch the word. He leaned against the counter. Same. For a moment, they just stood there, the hum of the vending machines filling the silence. Finally, she said, do you ever regret it? He blinked. Regret what? Leaving. He exhaled slowly. Every day. The words hung there, fragile and real. Ava looked at him, the defenses she'd built for 3 years trembling. Then why didn't you ever say that? Because I didn't think I had the right, he said quietly. You were moving on. I was a mess trying to prove I wasn't. Thunder rumbled outside. The lights flickered again. She swallowed hard. And now I see you, and I realize I never really stopped loving you. Her chest tightened. You can't say that. Not here. Not when. I'm your professor, he finished for her. She nodded, eyes burning. Exactly. He stepped closer, his voice low. Then pretend I didn't say it. Just tell me you don't feel anything, and I'll stop. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Another flash of lightning illuminated the hallway, and for one suspended heartbeat, they stood inches apart, the air between them electric. Then she whispered, "This isn't fair." "I know." His hand brushed hers, just once, barely a touch, and then he turned away, walking down the hall until the shadows swallowed him. Ava stood frozen, pulse racing, coffee cooling in her hand. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, so did she. The storm cleared by morning, but nothing felt calm. Ava's presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. She arrived early, slides memorized, palms damp. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and nervous energy. When she caught sight of Ethan near the front, tie straightened, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, her stomach tightened. He nodded to her, brief and professional. The only sign of what had passed between them was the way his jaw clenched when their eyes met. She delivered her talk flawlessly. When it ended, the audience applauded, and one of the panelists congratulated her on her remarkable emotional insight. If only they knew. By afternoon, her phone was buzzing with messages. "Heard you and Carter were seen together last night. You two look close, anything we should know?" Her throat went dry. Gossip traveled faster than truth in academia. Back on campus 2 days later, it got worse. A faculty assistant stopped her in the hall. "The department chair wants to see you." Ava's heart sank. Dr. Miller's office smelled like coffee and old paper. He motioned for her to sit. "Miss Hart, a few concerns have come to my attention." She clasped her hands. "Concerns?" "There are rumors," he said carefully, "about your relationship with Dr. Carter. I'm sure you understand how sensitive this is." Her chest felt tight. "They're false." "I want to believe that," he said gently, "but perception matters as much as truth. For your sake and his, you should keep distance until the semester ends." She nodded, hearing the subtext. One more whisper, and your career's over before it begins. When she left the office, Ethan was waiting at the end of the hall. He looked like he already knew. "You talked to Miller," she said. He nodded. "He called me in right after you. And I told him the truth, that nothing inappropriate happened." "Did he believe you?" "I don't think it matters," he said quietly. "What matters is what happens now." Ava crossed her arms. "You mean how to make this all disappear?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ava, listen to me. If this escalates, it could ruin your record. Let me take responsibility. I'll recuse myself from your evaluation." "No. It's the only way to protect you." "I don't need protecting," she said sharply. "I need this degree. I've worked too hard for it to look like I earned it through you." His expression softened with something like pride and sorrow mixed together. "You've always been stronger than me." She shook her head, tears threatening. "This isn't about strength, Ethan. It's about choice. And for once, I'm the one making it." He took a step back, exhaling slowly. "So what's your choice?" Ava swallowed hard. "We end this. Completely. No office hours, no private meetings, no late-night emails about research. Nothing." His voice was low, rough. "If that's what you need. It's what we both need." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I'll resign from supervising your project." Her breath caught. "You don't have to." "I do." He forced a small smile. "You deserve to succeed without my shadow following you." Silence fell between them, thick, final, necessary. "Goodbye, Ava," he said softly. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Goodbye, Dr. Carter." When he walked away, she felt the strange, hollow ache of closure, painful, but clean. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at her thesis draft. The title glowed on the screen. Emotional Resilience and Acceptance, a Study of Letting Go. Her hands trembled, but she smiled through the tears. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing herself from what could never be. The next morning, she received a brief email. From Ethan Carter. Subject: Good luck. You're going to do great things. E. She stared at it for a long time, then hit delete. Not because she was angry, because she was ready. The last day of the semester arrived quietly, the way endings often do. The campus was blooming again, trees heavy with new leaves, the air warm enough to hint at summer. Ava walked across the quad, her thesis folder clutched in her hands, her heart steady for the first time in months. She'd done it. Her research was finished, her defense scheduled, her presentation ready. And Ethan Carter was no longer her professor. He'd stepped down from her committee weeks ago, keeping his word. Rumor had faded. Whispers had died out. It was as if the storm they'd both survived had finally passed, leaving only calm in its wake. Still, when she entered the auditorium for her final thesis presentation, her chest tightened. She spotted him almost immediately, sitting in the back row, hands folded, expression unreadable. Of course he was here. She took a slow breath and walked to the podium. The screen behind her glowed with her title slide. Emotional Resilience and Acceptance, a Study of Letting Go. Her voice didn't tremble once. She spoke about detachment not as avoidance, but as understanding. About how love, loss, and pain could become teachers if you learned to listen to what they revealed about yourself. Halfway through, her eyes flicked toward the back of the room. Ethan's gaze met hers briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement, a peace. When she finished, the room fell into applause. The faculty chair smiled, nodding. Excellent work, Miss Hart. You've captured the essence of emotional maturity with clarity and heart. Heart. That word made her almost laugh. It was strange how something once broken could beat stronger after healing. Later, as the room emptied, Ava gathered her papers and turned to leave. Ethan was waiting near the door. Congratulations, he said softly. You were brilliant. She smiled faintly. Thank you. You've come a long way. So have you, she said. You actually let someone challenge you this semester. He chuckled quietly, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed. You always did that better than anyone. For a moment, they just stood there, the silence comfortable this time. He said, I meant what I wrote. You're going to do great things. She looked up at him, eyes clear. And you're going to teach a lot of people how not to repeat your mistakes. His smile faltered, then softened. Fair enough. Ethan, she said, his name still familiar, but no longer fragile. I don't hate you. I know. I don't love you either, she added, though her voice wasn't harsh. At least, not the way I did. He nodded slowly. That's probably for the best. She extended her hand. Goodbye, for real this time. He took it. His grip was warm, steady. When he let go, she felt the weight lift from her chest completely. Outside, the afternoon sunlight spilled across the campus. Ava walked through it, feeling lighter with each step. Her phone buzzed, a text from her friend. How'd it go? She typed back, perfect. I'm free. And she was. She didn't need his approval, his affection, or even his presence to define her anymore. The girl who once built her world around him was gone. What remained was a woman who understood herself, the kind of understanding no degree could measure. At the fountain in the center of campus, she paused. Students laughed nearby, water sparkled in the sun, and for the first time, she wasn't looking backward. She smiled, pulled a folded piece of paper from her folder, her thesis dedication, and read it quietly before tossing it into the recycling bin. For the people who taught me that letting go is not the end of love, but the beginning of peace. The breeze caught her hair, warm and soft. Ava Hart walked away without looking back. And somewhere behind her, Ethan Carter watched her go, not as a man who'd lost her, but as one who'd finally understood why he had to. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.